Okay, we will go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is May 2nd, 2024. This is our regularly scheduled City of Glenwood City Council meeting. And welcome to all who are here. First item, we'll go ahead and have our city clerk call roll.
Mayor Wusa.
Present.
Sorry, Mayor Wusa.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Dame.
Here.
Councilor Schachter.
Present.
Councilor Kaup. Councilor Weimer.
Here.
Councilor Zelinski. Councilor Godis.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Excellent. Do we have any agenda changes or conflicts? Hold on, I'm gonna have Shelley do it. Councilor Kaup.
I do have an
Mike.
agenda. I do have an agenda change request that we move item 12, the proclamation for wildfire preparedness month, to our next meeting on May 16th.
In a second.
Sure.
Oh,
Second.
great, thank you. I guess we don't really need to make that as a motion
As a
because
motion,
we'll just
okay.
move it. Yeah, I don't think it's needed.
What was that, Councilor Go, something about Southbridge?
I thought item 12 was Southbridge.
No, it's the proclamation for wildfire. Southbridge is 13.
13, yeah.
You may have,
Oh.
yeah, it may be correct online, but ultimately at one point in the last few days, we had a proclamation on this evening's agenda for item number 12, and that has now been moved to the next meeting.
Great,
So,
thanks.
thanks all. I will bring it back to item number 10. This is. Is it? Oh. Council. Done.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 15, I'm going to recuse myself due to a conflict of interest. Just so you guys know at this point.
Perfect. Thank you. We will now do we have any council announcements this evening? Counselor Cup.
I do have an announcement on, just to give a heads up for Wednesday, June 26th will be Bike There, Garfield County. It's Bike to Work Day. And it's being put on, there's special events from 3 to 6 at all the Garfield County libraries from Glenwood all the way to Parachute. And there will be other prizes and things going on throughout the day. So Wednesday, June 26th, please put that on your calendar. It's Bike to Work. And look for more details to follow. Thanks.
Perfect. Any other council announcements? Okay. We'll move on to item number 10. This is for citizens appearing before council for items not on the agenda. So if you're here to talk about any agenda items, if you could just hold off for the time being. We'll go ahead and close that section and move on to, I'll look for a motion to approve the consent agenda. You're on.
Madam Mayor, if I may, I would move that we approve the consent agenda
Mike.
as stated.
He is on.
Is that?
He's on.
I'm reading, okay. I would move that we approve the consent agenda as written.
I think we're having a tech issue maybe with
Yeah,
his because
little green
it looks like he's lit up.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, there.
Hello, hello. Okay, so Madam Mayor, I would like to move that we approve the consent agenda. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. I do think we're gonna struggle a little bit because Counselor Dem's microphone is not working. So I don't know if we can just say, don't say anything tonight. That's an option. He already recused himself from one item. Or we can see.
You can lean over here.
Okay, great. Okay, perfect. We're gonna go that approach. So with that in mind, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to actions and or presentations. This is the regular part of our scheduled agenda. And the first item is Southbridge update.
Hello, Council. Ryan Gordon, City Engineer. Sort of like last time, not a whole lot of updates on Southbridge. We are kind of in a lull, still doing quite a bit of work. The big updates is We are working with Jacobs Engineering, our engineering consultant, on updating the fees and the scope. We have a submittal from them and we are negotiating with them to get the correct scope and fee. I'm hoping to have that ironed out here in the very near future. We are also conducting, a bunch of different meetings with stakeholders and others, to kind of iron out what needs to happen. We're continually doing a lot of the right-of-way acquisition on the east side of the river. The other thing coming up is we have another meeting with CDOT and FHWA to discuss the grant and to get the grant information, at least the scope and some of the schedule items ironed out. So that's really kind of the updates right now. Not a whole lot of movement right now. So we're kind of waiting to get Jacobs engineering firm on board to kind of continue that process and get better costs on the scope that we're looking at. I'm happy to take any questions, but again, not a whole lot of substantial updates at this point.
Do we have any questions from council? Okay. Oh, Counselor Cow.
I just have a quick question, and maybe this isn't for you, Ryan. This might be for Steve and even council to consider, but strategically, at what point are we in a good position that we can go out and seriously start looking for financial partners on this project?
Yeah, I can start on this and Steve can chime in when needed. So we've actually already had a really positive meeting with Garfield County of really just to get them back up to speed. There's been a lot of changes over the last 2 years.
Okay.
Since they really were exposed to it. And I think that moment when we want to kind of go out and look at other funding partners, we're there in sort of a better range. One of the big things when we get Jacobs and when we start to work on through the next phase is to get, let's say, a 30%. The project is much further along, but some of the new design elements to really get a much better idea where we are. I would say right now we're at the position to say, hey, look, we have this range of where we are on the costs. That range is going to get narrowed as we get closer down to a real number. So I do think we're at the position now where it's appropriate to start having these conversations. And internally, we've been talking about, when do we start to look at that? And when do we really start to really feel what that ask is?
Okay. Because I think there should be a role for council on that to
Yeah.
go and make formal requests. And so having those meetings. Also, will it be appropriate at some point? In the past, council has had sometimes a meeting, maybe annual meeting with CDOT. Would that be a good thing to have fairly soon coming up?
Yeah, I think once we get our hands around the numbers a little bit, Fred Jarman indicated that he thought a joint work session with the county
Mhm.
would be appropriate coming up, and I think we could do the same thing with RAFTA and or CDOT.
With RAFTA and CDOT. That would be awesome. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Ryan, I believe we have public comment. So new role is that we are going to allow public comment on all items on the agenda, less proclamations and consent agenda. So we are going to see if there's anyone here from the public, and the rules will continue to be the same. 3 minutes per commenter. Come on up, introduce yourself. Let us know if you are in city limits, and let us hear your thoughts. So come on up, Meryl.
Oh boy, 3 minutes. I'm gonna have to talk fast. My name, Madam Mayor, Council, my name is Meryl Glickman, and thank you for the opportunity to present here. I'm here today as a board member representing the Cardiff Glen 2 HOA, but I have spoken to Cardiff. I've spoken to Cardiff 1 this afternoon, and they're behind us. We're going to meet on Monday at their board meeting. And so I'm assuming that they've read this statement, but they need to talk about it. So I'm hoping that we'll have all of Cardiff eventually behind this position statement that's in your packet. We have been talking about this and I've been following it for a long time, so I'm familiar with the original statement. Our board represents 64 of the 150 homes in Cardiff Glen. The original plan included mitigation and other work starting from the current roundabout by the school. The proposal presented by the city in the last meeting essentially eliminates all proposed work in front of the Cardiff community as well as 3 other homes. The proposed project starts where Cardiff ends. That's not good for us. It reevaluates and therefore possibly eliminates a sound barrier wall. Plus, it eliminates both traffic and drainage mitigating features in front of our community. So, I'm going to tell you what I think the impacts are, but I think the point is that there are more impacts to our community than any other community along this project route. Excessive traffic, noise, safety issues, and I am going to say pedestrians, church attendees, the many children. If you've ever driven by, there's a lot of children playing in that front yard in front of the townhomes, and teachers and students walking to school. So this is a real safety issue. It's a security issue because people are whizzing by. It's a privacy issue. And so essentially it's a loss of quiet enjoyment, which is a kind of a legal term, but that's what it is. So what I wanted to say is that it's well documented and everyone's been talking about the fact that this is not just an escape route, an evacuation route. It is truly been considered by the comprehensive plan and I've cited it all. I really wanted to show you that I did my research and I'm not making anything up. Our consultants, and I believe it was Jacobson, did a comprehensive traffic study and predicting giant increases in traffic. I mean, I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to know this. The study did not include Up Valley. Am I over time already? I'm done?
Yeah.
You're just getting started.
I know.
Here,
yeah.
finish.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah, come on up.
Go for it. Here, go. He's heard it 100 times. Oh, God. Yeah. Oh,
There you go.
Is this it?
Yeah.
We believe the studies done by the reputable engineering firm are solid, independent, and thorough. The city invested a significant time and money in the study, which the city engineering department endorsed. The city did not request a redo. While it's been suggested that the sunlight development was included in the study but never built, there are far more developments that have been built, with more being developed and more being proposed. See in note 4. It's important to point out the way the survey is done does not capture the up valley and down valley housing and visitor growth. That's significant, perhaps implying that the study possibly even undercounted future traffic levels. Second point here about the survey. As you know, the transportation study is required to receive federal funding. The purpose of the study is to determine whether decibel levels are such that a sound wall barrier be offered to the community. The affected neighbors are then surveyed, and if they express a desire for the sound barrier wall, it must be included as part of the project. 3 surveys were conducted in Cardiff Glen. 3 times the neighbors voted in favor of the sound wall. So why is the city hoping to redo the wall survey if traffic warrants? Does the city hope to get a better cost-saving answer that the sound barrier is not wanted by the community? We think a new survey is unnecessary since Cardiff residents bear the brunt of the project's multiple negative impacts. We urge the city to not ask Cardiff to bear the brunt of this cost-cutting measure as well. It will do us harm. So what is Cardiff Glen 2 HOA specifically asking for? That we not waste the community's resources doing redundant studies and surveys, to simply accept the conclusion from past studies and surveys that the sound barrier is both warranted and wanted, that the original project be reinstated to start at the current roundabout and continue past Cardiff, that both the city and the community work in good faith together to realize economical solutions acceptable to both parties on this part of the project. And finally, that this mitigation be instituted on the onset of the project, rather than on an as-needed basis once the project is completed, as has been suggested by the city. Please note, you can see in end note 11, this ask represents a very small portion of the overall project cost. In conclusion, Cardiff 2 HOA asks for your support on this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate you both coming up this evening, and I commend you for the amazing tag team you guys just did. It was effortless. It was great. Thank you. Is there anyone else here this evening that would like to talk about this agenda item specifically? Okay. I'm going to bring it back to council to see if there's any additional comments. Counselor Zelinski.
I just want to say my backyard is Midland. It's just the other side of the fence. And so I acutely feel all of your statements. I also walk past, I walk my dog around the airport. I walk past it all the time. So I hear you. I appreciate all of the legwork that you did and, the presentation that you gave tonight. And then I'm sure that it will be taken into consideration with the final project. So thank you.
Counselor Cope.
I just wanted to say too, I really appreciated your letter and specifically you acknowledged how important the Southbridge project is to the community, but that yes, there will be impacts to your neighborhood. As so many in our narrow valley are impacted by the traffic that we see. And so the city is working hard to reduce single occupant vehicle traffic as much as we can, but at the same time, this project is so important for the function of 27th Street Bridge, for the function of South Midland, and for the emergency evacuation along that route and south of town. So it's a very important project. That being said, I think considering the impacts to your community and to that Cardiff Glen neighborhood is very important. So we are in the project right now, or the process right now of getting prices down and reevaluating certain aspects of the project. But I'm hoping that engineering wise, we can work with the neighborhood and maybe have open houses or whatever needs to be done to make sure that some of these concerns are addressed in a reasonable manner. So I think maybe our city engineer has something to add to that. I'm not making any promises here, but we're looking for solutions that make it cost effective, but yet we don't want to ignore impacts to the neighborhood. So I'm confident that we can reach good solutions going forward. Thanks.
Counselor Godus.
Yeah, Midland is my front yard,
Mhm.
so I feel this acutely, much as it is on Airport Road, the front yard for all those townhomes. So I see all those kids out there when I'm walking my dog and all the activity that kind of happens in that de facto play area for a lot of families. I just want to commend you for a well-researched, really thoughtful, both comment and email. That was such a breath of fresh air. But I really, we have heard specifically about that element. We've only heard from a very small group of people. And so I commend you, and it's super helpful for me to hear, to have a position from the homeowners association from both Cardiff, Glen 1 and 2, and apparently there's a third, but that kind of work on your part is incredibly helpful. And it means that if it comes to a situation where, boy, we just have to get this thing under budget, we just can't, we have a lot of information, a lot of advocacy that it's going to make that decision very, very difficult. So thank you for doing that work and going through all that research so that, honestly, we don't have to. Thank you.
Counselor Dem.
Testing, no, not happening?
It's
Okay.
green, yes.
Okay, so I'll do this. Thanks for coming forward tonight. That was great. I have actually a question for Ryan, since it's fresh in my mind and for letting me process it. How much is that sound wall system?
The sound wall, which is in the project, which is not yet removed from the estimates that we've talked about or even contemplated, is about a $3 million wall.
is that the length of Cardiff Glen?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I also will say thank you to the speakers this evening who reached out very gracefully and kindly and respectfully asked for time. We had a lovely coffee over this, and there was a process, and I explained the process, and you have followed it really well in making sure that your voices were heard. And we thank you for the time and energy that you took to reiterate what Counselor Godus mentioned, is that you guys did some legwork that really helps us all, and we appreciate it. So thank you for coming this evening. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just like to add a few things, and I sort of reiterate, I want to thank Marilyn and Mark. They actually reached out to me, and we actually had a great meeting and a great dialogue. The only way we understand problems, obviously, is we actually have these conversations. So
Yeah.
it was really well received, and really appreciate everything they did. So I just want to provide some additional, information on kind of what's going on. So the main driver of the sound wall being required, it is a federal requirement as part of the EA and the NEPA process. And due to the fact that we are changing the project, predominantly because we are lowering the road, is the main driver. Federally, we are required to do a new sound study. And so that study then will inform us on the need of a sound wall. And regardless of whether a sound wall is there, we don't want to just say, there's no sound wall, we're not going to do anything. We absolutely recognize the fact that the front yards of the Cardiff Mesa, Cardiff Glen areas, a beautiful open space, needs to have some level of protection. We've discussed internally, is that a wooden fence? Is that some additional landscaping and vegetation? So we are certainly not looking just to abandon it in whatever form or fashion. And as I told Meryl and Mark as well, we are engaged and want to present and come to the HOAs and talk to them, and then work with an amenable solution, whatever that may be. I just want to iterate too that while we've identified some of these areas to cut, nothing has been cut from the project yet. We really took the opportunity with the federal government and CDOT to say, these are items that we want to contemplate scaling back, but are in no way included in any sort of cuts as of yet. And I do agree with Meryl and Mark, these are traffic calming measures that are really important. And so our desire is to make sure we have all of these in here. And I just want to say to reiterate our position staff-wise, we do not believe this is a bypass, right? This is an emergency access, and we are going to do everything we possibly can to make sure that we don't have excessive speeds, and that it remains safe. We can't do and control what people do or how they drive through our community, but we can certainly control the nature and how they do it. So we will do everything we can. And again, I really look forward to working with Mark and Marilyn. I really appreciate them bringing this to our attention. And I hope for, further communication with them as we move along.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Okay. With that, I will move on to item number 14. This is ordinance 2024-08 and ordinance of the City of Glenwood Springs, Colorado, imposing a temporary moratorium on the acceptance and processing of development applications for residential mixed use projects or more than 4 residential units within the geographical limits of the city.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you know, on the 23rd of April, ballot measure A passed. That implicates some changes to the development code. And in fact, in the actual changes to the charter, one of them is, go forth and change the code. Unless we place this moratorium in effect, we don't have a set of rules to process applications of over 4 units. And so it's kind of fraught with uncertainty, both for applicants as to whether or not they're, the decisions that you might make under, our best guess of process would be defensible. It also gives staff the time to be able to draft those regulations, be reviewed. And something that I think is important to understand is the way our code is set up. Changes to 070, which is the development code, are required to go through the Planning Commission. And part of the reason is both to hear from the Planning Commission about those changes, as well as give an additional public forum for the public to talk about those changes. So there's really no way to hit the April meeting for the Planning Commission. As you know, Hannah had a long-standing pre-planned trip out of the country. Hannah Klausman, the Community Development Director. And while I occasionally play a planner on TV, I'm actually not a planner. and I really need her help to work through that. As scheduled now, the planning commission meeting to hear those changes with the regular meeting is on the 25th of June. That would come to you all on the 18th of July. Your first meeting has been canceled. It's on the 4th of July. Normally that's we tend to do planning items anyway on the second meeting because it's so late in the month when we do the planning commission. That would mean if it passed on first reading, second reading before council would be August 1st. And then publication on August 5th. The reason for that delay in publication is that your meeting is on Thursday night, and underneath the PI's rules, they need those legal classifieds 48 hours in advance, so we can't get up to them until Monday. That's why the publication date of August 5th and an effective date of August 15th. So that's our target. Certainly we might wind up with a couple of special meetings, either for the planning commission if they wanted to meet earlier, or the council could meet earlier, that we might be able to push that up, but probably only by a couple of weeks, best case scenario. So that's really the schedule. There's not a lot we can do about it, but it is important from the standpoint of having something in place so people know that there is a pause in place, provides that breathing space as well as legal protection. You will see at least one or two requests for extensions of agreements that are affected by this. The one in particular that comes to mind is Butler Rents. They have some part of the agreement, a long time ago, when we did the 8th Street extension and the bridge bypass, some credits that they need to get used. They were in the process of applying. They did not have a complete application in on the date of the election. That's one that we will probably need to come in and amend that agreement to get them to the end of the moratorium period. In fairness to them, they didn't have anything to do with this. They were trying to do what you guys asked them to do last year. So with that, happy to answer any questions. This is first reading in a public hearing.
Counselor Kaup.
So I was reading through this, Carl, and I'm wondering, so when does this take effect? Is it after second reading, which would be next?
Yes, it would take effect immediately after second reading. We're operating under what is kind of called the pending ordinance doctrine and not accepting anything currently in kind of this gap period, because we don't have a set of rules to process it. And the good news is we don't have anything pending right now.
Okay, so there's nothing pending now.
There's nothing. There are a couple of applications that have already been submitted
Right.
that will be processed under the old rules because they have been submitted timely and complete prior to the 23rd of April. And they have a legal right to be processed underneath the old version of the code.
Okay,
But
okay.
you're not gonna see a bunch of that. They really have been reasonably quiet on that front with the timing of everything, just by happenstance.
Because typically, if a community does a moratorium, you'll get a rush of things
Yeah,
in that
really,
window, but we don't have a window here. is what
Yeah,
you're
and
saying.
the reality is we did get one annexation petition for a small parcel that was complete and got filed ahead of the moratorium. But honestly, we've been talking to the development community about the possibility of this. And I
Right,
think it's kind of been built into what they thought could or couldn't happen. So I think people have just kind of been planning around that. And some of the projects that potentially would have been affected were just not ready to go yet anyway,
right.
that have been in for pre-apps or things like that. So we have been consistently warning people that this was a possibility. Elections, you never know the outcome. So I don't think we're going to see a real, I don't think it's going to cause any real, too much of an upset to the system, if you will.
Okay, okay, great. Thank you.
Counselor Dunn.
All right.
Yeah, lean on over. There you go.
Does this, are we gonna run into any issues with the state's mandate for no moratoriums?
No, we're actually not. This is precisely one of the things that there's an exception to that state statute regarding is to process changes in your development code.
Counselor Gotis.
The last whereas in the ordinance, whereas the city of Glenwood Springs find and declares that it is necessary for the immediate preservation of public health, safety, and welfare to impose a temporary moratorium on the acceptance and processing of any annexation petitions and any development application for projects of more than 4 units to allow the city time to receive public comment and update the land use code. I'm questioning can we just put for second reading something in there potentially, because it doesn't feel like this is a public health, safety, and welfare. I mean, I understand the legal argument totally, but how does this protect preserve public health, the safety, or the welfare?
I guess my position would be is that it protects the public's welfare in the sense that it provides certainty as to the land use regulations being changed. Removing that uncertainty for folks is helpful. And it also certainly preserves the process. So in the absence of that, I mean, if you guys, want to take that extra 10 days after publication, that's your call.
I'm being nitpicky. It seemed like that was language maybe pulled from state statute.
Well, it's actually what we need to recite to make it an emergency ordinance.
Hmm.
Those are the conditions under which, and that's why I said from our standpoint, when we really looked at it, we felt that it was preserving the public welfare in that this is an important issue in the community. There was a recent election on it. That election, one of the components, what we would have done it anyway, even if that sentence not been in there, was to change the land use code. And so for all of those reasons, we felt like it was protecting the welfare of the community and was supportable as an emergency ordinance.
Okay, thanks.
Any additional questions or comments? Okay. With that in mind, we will open it to public comment. Is anyone from the public here, or in this case online, for this ordinance item specifically? If you are online and you would like to speak, please raise your hand. I'm going to close the public comment section, bring it back to council for a motion or discussion, I guess, motion, discussion, something. Ready? Counselor Zelinski.
I move that we approve on first reading ordinance 2024-08 as stated.
Counselor Coe.
I will second that motion.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, then I will call the question.
It passes. It's unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl, for all that. We appreciate it and your firm. Okay, we will move on to item number 15. And this is the one that Counselor Dan is going to recuse himself for. So he will be in the hall.
Please call me back in unless this one is the.
Mm-hmm. Yep, yep. Is, yes, company.
Okay. Emery Ellingson, Community Development, presenting on planning file 0624, code text amendments. I will be sharing screen. Okay, so this item is code text amendments for short-term rental and accessory tourist rental permits. So this is started with the work session in February with council, where staff presented a variety of different items for consideration for review. And those were taken to Planning and Zoning Commission, where they discussed and made recommendations at their March 26th meeting. So the items are listed in the staff report. Planning and Zoning Commission recommendations are also listed in the staff report with findings and conditions on page 6. And so city council actions tonight would be to approve items with conditions, deny items, or remand the application back to director and or planning commission for further consideration. And so that's what the options are. The criteria for a code amendment change is what you see up on the screen, so that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. It doesn't conflict with other provisions of code. It's necessary to address a demonstrated community need, necessary to respond to substantial changes in conditions and policy, and it's consistent with the code. So just kind of a recap of vacation rental permits. Again, two types: short-term rental permit, which allows for rental of the entire house and is limited by the 250-foot buffer. Accessory tourist rental, which is limited to 1 bedroom, maximum occupancy of 2 persons, and has to be owner occupied or have a resident manager on site. And that does not have the distance restrictions of a short-term rental. And then again, the city has regulated vacation rentals in some form since 2012. As the fiscal side of it, short-term rentals do collect taxes. So you have sales tax and lodging tax. And so a portion of that lodging tax does go to 2C funding for workforce housing. And then application fees for the short-term rental permits and for accessory tourist rental permits, they were increased by council in 2023 by those amounts. Just an overview over time permit cycles are on 2 years. And so you can just see the changes from year to year. It's worth to add in 2019, that's when building inspections were added. And so you did see a drop off in permits. And since then they have increased back similar to levels that they were at 2018 and 2019, but we're still beneath that. So here are all of the items that Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed and made recommendations for. And so I'll go through each one of the items, just with a little extra information. And then the bullet points on the right are what you'd find in the actual ordinance language. So buffer size, permit caps, application timelines, penalties and violations, ownership models, and then additional permit classes. So just to start out, actually here, I'd like to just go through quick the Planning and Zoning Commission recommendations. So for buffer size, Planning and Zoning Commission recommended not changing the existing buffer, keeping it 250. They recommended reducing the cap within the GID to 15%. Actually, application timelines, as seen in the staff report. So again, buffer size, that's what a 250-foot buffer looks like. If it were increased, this is what it would look like. So that would be a 300-foot buffer. I know that number was discussed during the work session. Again, Planning and Zoning Commission did not recommend a change in that. If it were changed to 300, it would affect 316 properties where now they're eligible, and at 300 they wouldn't. So that's one item up for discussion. And then these were provided in the report too, but this just kind of each part of town, what the 250-foot looks like in dark green, what the 300-foot looks like in light green. And then it also shows all the short-term rentals and accessory tourist rental permits. So each section of town. So this is the downtown. So the GID is marked out in red, and permits inside that restricted by the 250-foot buffer. And so we'll come back to that. Midland, middle of Glenwood, and then South Glenwood. So one aspect that Planning and Zoning Commission discussed was permit caps and how those are calculated. And so right now, it's split. Areas within the GID is capped at 18% of free market units. Outside is 5%. But one aspect of this is, if you see in the table, we do not count permits within the GID towards the total. And so that's where right now, of the cap of 210, there are 110 permits remaining, because those 25 within the GID don't count towards the total. And so one of Planning and Zoning recommendations was to, as you see on this screen, count that towards the total. And that does change the remaining capacity. And again, just for reference, a little closer vision, that's what the GID is. So everything within the red. Another item which Planning and Zoning Commission recommended was to change the cap within the GID from 18% to 15%. And as you can see, that would change the amount of remaining permits available from 36 to 30. It's also important to note that these percentages are based on total number of free market units. So each year when new units are built, that number does go up. So this is not necessarily a static number that, if a building were built in the GID with 10 units, that 15, 18, 16% is going to look different. So those numbers are subject to change. Application timelines. So right now, code does not define a specific amount of time for an application to be completed. The full process is you submit the application, business license and application fee, schedule and pass a building inspection, and complete a public notice. And oftentimes, applicants will submit the application, have their building inspection, and then take a very long time to complete public notice. All the while that permit is pending, nobody else can apply for one. So just finding a point where having a deadline to finish would help the process. So Planning and Zoning Commission recommended a 6-month period with a 6-month extension at discretion of Community Development Director. And then also, currently code does not prohibit someone from, say, submitting a building permit for a house in conjunction with a short-term rental permit. And another one of the recommendations from Planning and Zoning Commission was to require a certificate of occupancy for a short-term rental permit. There has to be a house there to have a permit. Penalties, violations. So this section is addressing, I would say first off, fortunately, we have not had many issues with short-term rentals. Most of the permit holders do a good job being good neighbors, but this was identifying some gaps in the language. And so this is the way the code language reads. And I think a couple of things to point out is it's cumulative. So it's not per year, it's kind of at 3 strikes. And then it also includes property owner, tenant, or guest. So whether that's someone that has a short-term rental permit, maybe rents it out once a year, depending, doesn't matter how they use it, property owner, tenant, or guest has a violation occurring upon the premises and is convicted, and that could be a ticket being written by a police officer, or perhaps going to municipal court. The permit can be revoked automatically. So kind of a 3 strikes and you're out. But it's also important to read up above. A short-term rental permit can be revoked at any time if it's being termed as non-compliant. So there already is a lot of teeth in this, but the changes would just help tighten that up a little bit. And like I said, fortunately, we have not had to use it much. And then also it's just calling out Article 100. And actually, I think the next item covers these ordinances. 110 is nuisances, 120 is animal control. So again, it would be conviction, so ticket or municipal court. And then finally, ownership models. So something basically nationwide that you're starting to see more of just as vacation rentals get more sophisticated, because at the start it was very informal. You're starting to see more properties be held in group ownership models. And right now a permit cannot be transferred with the sale of a home. Sale of a home, permit expires, goes away. And that's very clear when it's one individual to another individual, who that permit was owned by, who the house was owned by, and who is the new owner. When you have the group model, that is not as clear. So we looked at a couple different communities. So there's several places in Colorado that have addressed this in their code. Crested Butte, for example, you can have a property in a group ownership model, but the person that holds the permit, and this is in Crested Butte, has to be a natural person with at least 15% ownership. And that person is identified at time of application. And then if that person changed, that would constitute a change in ownership. Buena Vista does it a little bit differently. They have categories for non-resident and resident, and any property held in group ownership, regardless of where that person lives, is just considered a non-resident license. So there are a couple existing examples in Colorado. Of the permits that exist now, 23 permits are held by an LLC and then 9 by a trust. And so it's about 20% of the permits. But again, because we prohibit the transfer of permits, it's important to understand how a property is owned. And so these are the suggested changes. And I would say too that these are starting points for discussion. But that's a natural person, the person be 18 years or older, and they have a controlling interest of 33% or more. And then at time of all new applications and renewals, any permit that is in this model would be required to basically submit their ownership information. These are the people that own it. I'm the permit holder. I have 40%. And so all of that, I would say, are starting points for discussion. And like I said, so Crested Butte had it at 15%. Other communities, that's something that can be further discussed. And then also at the work session, there was interest in creating a third permit class. It would function like the short-term rental permit. It would be for rental of the entire house. It would not be subject to the 250-foot buffer rule. And then there would be a limited capacity for number of nights, like within a year, within a permit period. So this was not discussed at Planning and Zoning Commission in depth, and they did not make any specific recommendations. In general, staff does not recommend this type of permit, for just a couple of reasons. The reason the 250-foot rule was instituted was to mitigate the impacts of a short-term rental permit on a neighborhood. And so even when it is limited to, 10 nights a year, 20 nights a year, you still would have an impact on the neighborhood. Because again, there's no requirement for the short-term rental permit that someone rents it a certain number of nights a year. So the impact wouldn't necessarily be that different. And that was the intent of the 250-foot rule. So since that's in place, creating a permit class that would not observe it is a little counter to the intent. And then also too, there are a lot of options for rentals that aren't necessarily that short-term rental of an entire house for the 30 days. The accessory tourist rental permit is already existing and allows for rental without the distance. Granted, it is limited to 1 bedroom and only 2 persons, so it does not function the same as a house. And then third was just the increase in managing the program. It could possibly require additional staff or using a third party to manage it. And it would need a little more analysis to look at, okay, who would it serve? How many people would it serve? What would the cost on like staff to administer it be? I did have a conversation with the city clerk in Crested Butte. They have a permit that operates similarly. And the main part with that is it creates a lot of basically auditing of how many nights someone is staying, which would be reflected through the business license. So that would be kind of the third reason. If council wanted to pursue the creation of additional permit class, these are just a couple of the recommendations. Limit it to, owners can only have 1 type of permit. They would not be able to hold 2 of them. If any natural person ownership requirements are approved, have it apply to this as well. You use a lot of the similar metrics that are for the other one, but you could tailor it to however you wanted it to look. So the buffer is a good system, caps, things like that. And then to building inspections and the business license. So again, these are the criteria. Main points being these proposed amendments are consistent with the comprehensive plan. They don't conflict with other parts of code, and they're really here to address the need for regulations to keep in pace with the changing marketplace, and then also continue to just strike the balance between benefits and impacts with short-term rentals, which I think the existing program does a pretty good job with. There was a public comment, an official public comment submitted with the packet. I've talked to a couple permit holders. It looks like we have a couple online as well that may want to comment. So again, what was included was in your packet. A lot of it was just questions on the different items and what it would mean for them going forward. So again, that's what's being considered. And then those are the actions.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'll stop sharing screen.
So just a quick rundown, we'll do council questions, then we'll do online public comment, in-person comment, and then we'll bring it back to council for a motion and discussion. So for the time being, I'm going to start with Councilor Sachter for some questions.
Question. Thank you, Emery. A lot of work. Appreciate it. Just want to clarify the buffer zone to be eligible. Partial coverage of the buffer does not eliminate a short-term rental permit, or does it?
Correct.
You have
So
to be totally encompassed
correct, 100%.
by the green. Okay. And the buffer apparently is doing a pretty good job in most areas of limiting the capacity.
Correct. So effectively the buffer, as you saw, the cap is at 210. There's currently 100 permits. So we're quite far from being at capacity with that part, but the buffer does a good job of dispersing everything. And then that's when, we're not telling people you're not eligible because there's no more permits left. You're ineligible because you're too close to an existing.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Great, we'll open it to public comment then. Is there anyone here this evening that would like to make a 3-minute comment about our current STR rules and amending them? Anyone online for this purpose? If so, if you could just raise your hand digitally. Okay. Oh, Jennifer Vanian. If we can just move her over to panelist, and Jennifer, you know the rules. Thank you so much for attending this evening. You've got 3 minutes. If you can just say your name and if you live in city limits.
Hi, this is Jennifer Vanyan, 1016 Minter Avenue. Thank you for allowing public comment. I guess I have a little bit, I know that there are some communities that have completely reevaluated vacation rentals just because of what everyone considers to be a pressing problem for affordable housing. And 3 of the buildings that are out, the very first buildings that were out by the community garden, that are rentals, the big rental units, those house 250 units. So it's just always going to be a question for me. Why would you have vacation rentals in a town that's suffering from affordable housing? Because it absolutely takes rentals out of working people or community members' ability to rent. So that's my comment, and that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right,
Anyone
thanks.
else? Yeah, for sure. Anyone else here this evening to make comments? Anyone else online would like to make a comment specific to this item? Raise your hand digitally if you do. Okay. I see a few names on the list that have already submitted some comments to council as well. So we will close the public comment section of this item, bring it back to council for a motion and then some associated discussion. Councilor Schechter.
Before I make a motion, may I ask Carl a question?
Yeah, sure. Mhm.
Can the motion, we don't have to break these out, if we choose to make a motion to adopt
Yeah,
all
it-
the recommendations as
yeah, it
stated
would-
in the
it-
findings on page
It would
6?
just be to move to adopt the ordinance, which contains everything in it. If you just wanted to go wholesale with the planning commission or with the recommendations that came up.
Okay, then in that case, Madam Mayor, I would make a motion regarding, what are we, planning item? I guess I better look.
09-2020.
Yeah.
2024-09. I would make a motion that we adopt as proposed all the recommendations by the Planning and Zoning Commission and the findings on page 6. I believe it was page 6.
I second.
Okay. We'll go ahead and open it up for some comment then. Counselor Zelinski, you're still.
All right, so I recall going through all of these extensively in work session and, reading through all the comments from P and Z and community input. I feel like this embraces both community need, an opportunity for our current residents to kind of engage in small business model and, recognize like that evolving nature of vacation rentals. And so I think that I feel like we vetted this quite thoroughly and I don't see any reason to revisit it beyond this.
Counselor Coe.
I agree with that comment. I feel like we've been through this quite a bit and we seem to have a model that's working quite well. I do like the idea that from the recommendations from staff and P and Z that we include the short-term rentals that are in the GID in the total count for the city. I had one additional question as far as just locking it down a little bit farther, which would be to reduce that full cap throughout the city from the 5% down to either 4 or 4.5%, just to bring it more in line with what the 250-foot buffer seems to be doing. But I don't know that we necessarily need it at this point. It was just acknowledging, as Emery said, that as new units are added to the city, that 5% grows along with that. So that allows more units within the city. So I don't know if anybody else on council is interested in looking at reducing that to 4 or 4.5%, but otherwise I agree with the motion and I'll support it.
Counselor Schechter.
Well, maybe I misunderstood. I believe 4% was one of the recommendations. I actually prefer 3.5. If it's not technically one of the recommendations adopted by the motion, I would amend to add that. But was,
It's fine.
I thought P and Z. Oh, well, I would be happy to amend to 4. And my reasoning, the cap, we've been one of the more proactive communities, and I think it's achieved a good balance between economics demand and community neighborhood demands, and they all conflict with each other to some degree. I'm strongly in favor of lowering that cap, even though it's theoretical. The buffer works, but the distance between the number of units now and the gap is huge and probably insurmountable. So I see no downside to lower that, particularly as a little bit of buffer for new unit growth. So I would amend to lower it to 4. I'm sorry, I thought that was part of the recommendation. I would amend if there's a second, to lower it to 4%. And I also like the GID issue, and going from 36 to 30, I don't think harms anybody and helps the downtown core. So I'm in favor of my own motion, and I would amend with a second to 4% cap.
Would you amend your second?
I would amend the second in order to facilitate conversation.
We're already conversing. We
So-
don't need.
So I don't know that I'm quite ready to amend
Yeah,
my second
yeah,
yet.
okay. That's cool. So really what I just heard is that she's not quite ready to amend her second. Go ahead.
Might help her.
Everybody wants to talk. Hold on one second, Counselor Schachter. I'm gonna have Counselor Zelinski finish up first.
So with the buffer already providing that, I think that we run the risk of regulating possibilities. We've already are facing an ordinance on like new building and all the things. I feel like there's a striking a balance between over-regulating and over-managing and allowing some flex, because then, you don't know what might happen and we might be dialing something back or changing. So I feel like, with the existing parameters functioning basically by controlling that, realistically, I don't know how many units would be added that would make enough of an impact that we need to reduce it by 1%. When we already have that parameter in place. So that's my only reluctance is I feel like we might be running the risk of over managing this just a little bit.
Really quickly, before we move on, Emery, would you, to level the playing field, will you pull up in your presentation the parameters we're discussing, approving?
Madam Mayor, while he's doing that,
Mhm.
can I just clarify, Councilor Schaffner, that your intent was to include in your motion the approval of ordinance 2409? But your intent in your motion was to also include the approval of the ordinance.
Yeah.
2024-09.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
Okay.
Thank you. Perfect. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I just think that's, if we just pause for just a moment to clarify, you can see that we didn't include a reduction to 4.
I
It's
can't see
fine.
that far.
Yeah, it's.
Make it bigger.
It's also
It's in the packet, yeah.
Yeah, I just simply, we have it in our packet, but for those who
Right.
are watching at home or even who are here, it's just so nice for them to be able to reference it again. So the current motion is an approval, although Councilor Schachter is discussing a reduction from the 5%, which is current, down to 4 for everyone. Okay, so I'm going to have you jump back in and you're lit up.
Well, I just want to clarify if I may, because I think and maybe Emery can answer, my understanding is 4% would take us from about approximately 125 current permits to 168 versus 210. So there's still a huge gap for growth in areas of growth beyond the buffers that we don't know will happen. That's why I just want to lower that gap, even though it still leaves a lot of room for potential growth, should there be some.
Counselor Zelinski, are you?
Well,
all set?
am I correct? I was.
I think maybe just to recap, so the question is just that the growth would result, additional residential growth would lead to an increase in the permit cap. I think
By
that's-
percentage, but if we drop to 4%, are we talking about roughly 168 cap
Correct,
versus the current 210?
correct.
Okay, that's why I'm
thank you.
interested in lowering that.
Okay, so conversely, to my point, 1,000 units is 10. If 1%, right? So.
Okay.
I just feel like we're like splitting hairs.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so to me, I just feel like this is like not a discussion worth.
No, I just don't want to encourage some.
Yeah, so what I just heard is that Erin is not going to
I'm not
amend her
gonna-
second.
I'm not
Okay,
gonna.
great. Counselor Gotis. Oops, hold on, late. One more time, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we're splitting hairs. I think, in the report, Counselor Steiner, to your point, it did point out that there was a number of additional buffers that were not captured, such as HOAs, PUDs, multifamilies. So I don't know that 125 isn't very close to the practical limit of where we're at right now. I think if a future council wants to amend it to allow, I don't know, no more than 5% of a multifamily or something like that, then yes, we might hit that cap pretty quick. But right now, with the current regulations, I support taking the 18% from the GID down to 15, because 18, I'll tell you how 18 was arrived at. It was, somebody said 36%, and someone said 0 in the downtown. We want a vibrant downtown with 0. Somebody said, I'm okay with like half. Somebody's like, what about a third? How about 36? And for like a meeting, it was 36, and then it became 18. That's why it's at 18. Because I remember that conversation. It was how ridiculous it was. And so I think if we were to have, hypothetically, a deal where it's 3.5 and 18, a future council or committee would be like, what the hell, guys? So I think 15 sounds right, sounds round, because 18 was just a political compromise, which 3.5 would be as well. And so would 4. So I think 5 sounds right. And the reality is we're barely scratching half. And practically speaking, I don't know that we have much more than a couple dozen more until people get real creative. And so I think 15 and 5 sounds reasonable, sounds rational. So that would be my response to that. And so I guess I would support Aaron in that. As a point of order, Carl, our parliamentary, if Sumner does not longer supports his own motion, could he withdraw his motion, or would we take a vote to potentially?
Motion stand.
The motion
okay.
stands unless the second is withdrawn, the first is stuck with.
I see.
their-
Okay. Okay. So the order would be, you would have to, if you felt strongly enough, you'd have to vote against your motion.
Yeah.
Okay. That was just a question of order.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, me too. It's after 7 years. I think I like the consideration given to LLCs and not having LLCs and that ownership and getting around that.
Mhm.
I personally think that we should not have grandfather whoever has it in now, but that short-term ownership should only be available, additional ones from what we have now, to residents of Glenwood Springs. I don't really see a whole lot in what we're doing. We're going around the edges. There's stuff I like, tweaking 18 to 15, keeping 5, reaffirming some of these things. So I think the exercise is a good exercise, and the conversation has been great, but I don't really see a whole lot of wins for additional wins. I think there's opportunity for additional wins to this conversation. I just don't see that we've done that. And so I don't think we should have investors from Dallas or Denver, or Duluth
Can I
be.
shorten that for you? You don't have a choice.
Why?
Equal protection clause.
Yeah.
There's lots of litigation out there on it right now.
Okay, then I love what we're doing with LLCs.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that, legal intervention and maybe emotional one too. I want to make the case, as I often have, and I want to give it one more try, that to my point of this, we're not doing a lot for the residents of Glenwood Springs with this. Going from 18 to 15% does not provide any more protections. I think if we take the, and I'm talking about the third class, I think if we limit it to 0.5% or approximately 20 units, you know, the idea of this buffer being violated and going against what we want. I don't want my neighbor and my next door neighbor and the neighbor across the street having short-term rentals. That's how this conversation got started. The moratorium actually got started 5 years ago. So I don't want that. But practically speaking, if we're talking about 20 throughout the whole community and limited to, I'm going to say 90 nights, could be 60 nights, up for discussion. I think it's incredibly unlikely. I think it's probably likely, let me go with that, the affirmative, that 10 people in the summer, teachers, people on vacation will say, you know what, I'm going to be gone for a month. I want to take my kids cross country. This is who I want to, you know, this is what I want to do. And there will be 1 or 2 in Park West, and there'll be a couple in Park or in West Glenwood. It'll be a couple spread around. The idea that 20 would all be hypothetically in Park West at one time, I think is far-fetched. So I think in limiting it to a pilot program, effective, you know, I don't think we need to wait 2 years, but limiting it to a pilot program, I think would answer that question. I think the other 10 people out of this would probably do it in the winter. My neighbor, on my street, I have 5 people on my street, 3 are retirees, and this winter felt like a ghost town. I wouldn't have minded if one of my neighbors, while they were on vacation in Florida or Denver, visiting grandkids, took the opportunity for a month to rent it out. I just wouldn't mind. Maybe other people would. So I don't think we need to hire an additional person. I think that something like this is going to be our residents. They're not investors. They're not people that we have to keep our thumb under as much because these are our neighbors. And I think that the best regulation of short-term rentals is the neighborhood because they let you know. They let you know when there's a problem, I'm sure. So I think if we limit it, to allow someone to go care for aging or dying parents for a couple of months when the average cost of a house, a single family residence in Glenwood is $900,000. And with interest rates, we're talking about a $6,000 a month payment with utilities. That's a big nut to crack for a resident, and to allow them to recapture that in either, like I said, maybe vacation, maybe it's their own health issues. I think it's something that we can actually do for our residents. We're not doing anything else in this whole thing that's going to really help our residents, I think, in a significant way. Little nips and tucks, but I would take advantage of this. My neighbor across the creek takes advantage of this or doesn't take advantage of this. She just has the whole permit. And so I think Sumner, what we see in the community is a number of those. I don't know how many, but a number of people do that already, but they only rent out their homes a couple dozen times a year. And so I think memorializing that in the third class would be something that I would really like this council to consider on a trial basis for 2 years with no more than 20 units and no more than 90 days.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in right now and just kind of clarify a few things, both from my own perspective and kind of where we are now. I do appreciate that your creativity and your idea that someone could use it to that degree. I also really like our community development office, and I don't know that they have the bandwidth to try to navigate and manage this. I think it's one of the challenges that existed. In addition, while it might be an amenity to those people, then what's the purpose of the buffer? These are, a lot of people don't want a short-term rental next to them. And that's the reason that we pull it in a little bit. I also think that, from a real estate perspective, in the last year, I have sold homes that were short-term rentals, meaning that permit ceased to exist at the transfer of ownership. And we lost one of those. So I think it's a pretty organic system. I think it's actually working well. I remember other communities, I think Hannah even said, Hannah Klausman, Community Development Director, she said other people are calling us to say, how are you guys doing? How's it working? You guys you did the heavy lift. So I can see a little tweaking, but I am not one to want to change the rules of the game. People, this is their home. And in some cases, they do have a plan to utilize it in a different way. To Jennifer Vanian, I agree and I appreciate that indeed we do have an affordable housing concern and crisis that we're always trying to navigate. I will also say though, that there's private ownership. People should be allowed to a degree if they permit it, they do it by the book. They should be able to use their home in the capacity that they want to. And if that means that their home qualifies for a short-term rental, and they've known it for years, they've maybe not taken advantage of it, I'm not going to pull back and change the rules now. So I am comfortable moving forward with this. I think that to everyone who has been part of the dialogue in the process, this is a fair and equitable way to move forward. Keep in mind that at this point, what are we at? 4,500 housing units in?
So it's free market units, it's 4,211.
Okay, 4,000, thank you. So knowing that there's 125 in town, that's negligible. I live next door to one, so I know what the impact of them is. And I also know that generally speaking, the owner is responsive and respectful of the fact that there is this lodging option in the middle of my neighborhood. I think that we can serve our community well by keeping the rules somewhat similar. I am comfortable reducing from 18 to 15 because I think it seems, to your point, Councilor Godus, it seems logical. It has merit. But otherwise, I will be supporting the motion as you originally made it and not reducing to 4%. Councilor Kaup.
I just wanted to add to that and respond to Councilor Godus's request. I can't support a third category for some of the reasons that were mentioned in the packet, just the complexity of it. But I also feel like if we have snowbirds and people are leaving for the winter or something, you can rent your home out for more than 30 days. That's allowed. This is not, it's the short-term piece of it. It's the under 30-day rental and the turnover that really disrupts the neighborhood. So I'm for keeping that out of it. So at this point, if the rest of council agrees, I would want to stick to that. But I just want to make a statement that I do feel like I agree with you, Mayor, that we have a system that's working really well. And I'm really happy that we got out in front of it. We've limited short-term rentals in our community to 5%. And I think that's a really strong statement from this council and our community that we're putting our residents first. We're not just putting our city up for sale to be sold off to the highest bidder for investment properties. And, there are communities within Colorado that are 40, 60% second homes and short-term rentals. That much of their housing stock is lost to investors versus residents that live here. I think Glenwood has strongly stated that we want our homes to be used for people that live here and work here and for our community. So I'll support this motion tonight. I think these are small tweaks that are going to improve what we have on the books, but I think it's working well and it's hopefully doing what we can to preserve our community and our homes for the people who live here.
Councilor Zelinski.
So, Shelley, I was going to ask for clarification on that because I was pretty sure that you can do that. So I agree with everything that's been said. I recognize what you're saying. Like, I think that that's probably the best way to go is that you would just rent it out for a month and rent it out, for 4 months if you're going. So I'd be comfortable with all that.
Councilor Godus.
Sounds like the ship has sailed on that. I'll just say, I don't think there's a lot of retirees that, if they're going away for 3 or 4 months, or teachers, it's in the summer maybe, but I think it's tough to find somebody who just needs a 90-day rental. It seems to be an either or, generally speaking. I either need long-term year rental or I need a couple of weeks. It doesn't seem like that is a real option. And so I think what we'll probably see is what my neighbor does. She has a established long-term rental that only gets rent out, 2 or 3 weeks a year. So she would absolutely qualify and take care of, advantage of this, but she has to do that. So as far as more or less work, I think this is the exact same amount of work for staff to address that conversation because it's already happening. It just happens in the way under the same permitting structure. But that's all.
Okay. If there are no additional questions, I am going to go ahead and call the question and we'll move forward on this. Okay. And it is 7:30. Go ahead, Brian. Thank you.
Oh,
It passes 6-0 with Counselor Dem out.
Recused.
Working.
Thank you. I think if, do people want to keep going? We have one more big item. We can get Counselor Dem back in here. Okay, great.
I'm super hopeful it doesn't take very long.
Okay, great. I'm gonna grab a drink really quickly. Okay, we are back. Thank you so much all. We are gonna go ahead and move right along to item number 16. This is ordinance 2024-10 regarding animal and wildlife protection regarding solid waste collection.
I think I can make Matt come up if we need to. When we updated the code, as we were working through some of the issues around pay-as-you-throw, one of the penalty sections got dropped and then got cross-referenced to the wrong section. What you see before you is really just reinstituting kind of a 3-step process on enforcement on wildlife cans, starting at an escalator, moving up from a $50 fine to a $500 fine. So you have to come into court and talk about it. That section, those penalties got dropped in the last iteration. So right now it's just a summons into court. And there isn't kind of that defined stepped up fine schedule. Literally, that's all we're doing with this ordinance is just a little bit of cleanup. Happy to answer any questions, and Matt's here if you need to talk to him about it as well.
Hey, Matt. Anyone have questions, comments, discussion? Counselor Schachter.
Just a comment, I'm in favor of this. I don't want to get in the way of it. But what I would hope as we're looking forward at the contract, as we're looking forward at the budget year, that we do some estimated costs and figure out how we can subsidize the cost of bear-proof cans. It is so elemental to our environment, our community, and pay-as-you-throw is great and did a great job implementing, but it changed the dynamics of bear-proof. And I just hope that over the course of the next year or whatever it takes, that we take a look at a way that we can subsidize or increase bear-proof without the burden of cost to the residents. Thank you.
Counselor Zelinski.
100%, I concur. That's, and I believe that that's a shared sentiment. So I basically just saying this because I want the public to hear it.
Yeah.
So
That the funny thing is I thought I was gonna have to go to Matt about this and be like, it's not fair. We need some money to, there is a financial impact to people and we're kind of the impetus, especially for those who had the bear-proof trash cans that aren't compliant. So what I would like to hear from you, City Manager Steve Boyd, is that we can do a work session or something where we can dig into this a little bit, see what's fair and equitable to kind of offset the cost to our residents.
June
Sounds lovely.
it is.
Okay, thank you. Perfect. With that in mind, though, I do need it's an ordinance, so we're gonna open it to public comment first. Anyone here, online or in person, that wants to talk about bear-proof trash cans and fines associated? Okay, I'm gonna close public comment, bring it back for a motion. Counselor.
Oh.
Counselor Cup.
I move to approve ordinance number 10, series 2024 on the protection of wildlife.
Counselor Zelinski. I second. Okay. Any discussion before we call the question? Okay.
It's unanimous. It passes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you all. And for those online, if you can just be patient with us, we want to, this is the fine tuning that occurs when we went to a franchise trash service. So if you can just be patient, we will work through some of the nuances and costs associated. So we will move on to report from city administration. City Manager Steve Boyd.
Thank you. Just a couple quick things. Sarah Weigel was out of town this week on vacation. She's gone next week too, so you should feel sorry for me. We have narrowed our list of candidates for the Vogelar Park Planning Grant to 2. They are both highly qualified. We know one of them a little bit, but we expect to be able to put that on the consent agenda on 5/16 for award. We have 3 candidates that we're going to bring in for fire chief. We're going to bring them in on the 21st and 22nd, which I think is a Monday and a Tuesday. We'll invite them in earlier than that so they can stay the weekend, bring their spouse, whatever. But during those couple of days, we'll try to find some time for public events, and you guys can come spend some time and see what you think about these 3 guys. I think that's it for me.
Okay, perfect. City Attorney Carl Hanlon.
Thank you. Just something real quick tonight. You got an email from me, kind of an update on the Mitchell Cooper lawsuit. For the public's benefit, if they didn't know, Mitchell Cooper filed a lawsuit against the city on April 4th, variety of allegations related to the 1984 contract, primarily related to the connection to RAFTA's conversion for critical needs for workforce housing. Keeping in mind that Mitchell Cooper since 2018 has been unable to produce its own potable water supply and has been utilizing an emergency interconnect with the city, and also can't provide fire flows through their system. So that is something that's going to work itself through the system. We were very close to settling this issue last fall, and Mitchell Cooper pulled out of those conversations, let go of their then counsel and hired new counsel that is involved now. Our hope is that we can get back to the bargaining table relatively quickly. That's my goal. That having been said, I do need authorization from the council to file responsive pleadings in the case on behalf of the city. I'd just like to get that on the record. So if somebody could make that motion, I'd sure appreciate it.
Counselor Gotis.
I move we authorize our attorney to make pleadings in the case in the Mitchell Cooper matter.
I second the motion.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you. Nothing else.
Would you also, I'm guessing that Andrea is over there and her fingers are tapping super with the Post Independent. She's probably going to want lots of updates on this. If you can just work with her to make sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I
great.
will.
Thank you.
And what I was going to say is that we're not going to be filing responsive pleadings until probably the 13th of the month.
Okay.
Whether that is an answer in counterclaims or a motion to dismiss, we're still working through which one of those is more appropriate at this time. So as soon as we have that, obviously we'll share that information with the paper
Thank you.
once it gets filed.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. Any additional comments from you guys? Okay. I'm going to bring it back to council for council comments. Light them up. Counselor Gotis.
So today I was at the Northwest Cog just Northwest Cog, EDC, Economic Development Community, and it was a lot of tourism conversation. Tourism in communities of Route Grand, Eagle, Summit, and Picken County, which is the Northwest Cog. 3 years ago, we had a survey, a valley-wide survey done with funding from OEdit. And we got a nice presentation. And when I asked for the aggregate data to see, what do people in Glenwood actually think, they refused to share that. And so if you want the data, we can get the aggregate data. I talked to the author of Insights Collective who did this. It's a two-sided sheet. I won't go through it. You can read it, but it really talked about how communities in these 5 counties and Glenwood Springs, because we're a member of Northwest Cog. So while it doesn't have us or Garfield County on it, it did take us into thing. And they said that they got a very good response rate from Glenwood Springs. So the aggregate data I will share with you when I get it from them. I've had that request. Just really kind of interesting views on where residents, electeds, and tourists feel about the balance of resident versus tourism focus. So I think as elected officials and policymakers, it's just a great tool. I thought it was a great conversation. The other thing I'd like to say is, I wrote a letter to the editor recently, and a fellow counselor, I was surprised, but let me know that they did not think that it was as supportive of a council decision as they would have liked. And I took pains to craft the letter in a manner that was very specific to an outside group and did not disparage my fellow counselors or decision I didn't agree with. But after feedback from several counselors, I reread the letter, and I do see that there was bias in my tone and content that came through inadvertently, but no less accurately. And I can see how my comments definitely can appear to not support the council, of which I'm a very proud member of. And even when I'm in the minority, that should not happen, and for that I apologize. I will limit my public comments in the future to items the council has not taken official positions on, and will strive to be more thoughtful. I'll also strive to get more on board with the team and not let perfect be the enemy of good. Thank you.
No, to follow up on that is that I think that we forget so often what a large platform we have for our voices to be heard. As elected officials, we are heard. What we say are either with our words or with our vote. But at the end of the day, I've been a strong believer in the 3.5 years that I've been on council, that our vote is of one. When it's done, it is done. We have made a decision collectively. There have been many times I did not go to social hour because I was not in agreement, and I had a hard time with where we were and where we landed. But I really honor the process of what we do up here. And so it is hard. It was hard when we had another city councilor who regularly wrote letters on items that we had discussed. And it was hard to see it. So I appreciate this, and I appreciate your words, and they have power and they have meaning. And I did hear you, and I thank you. So thank you. Counselor Zelinski.
Yes. So on that note, I thank you for your apology. I was really proud of the work that was done, and the response that the community very clearly requested of us. I feel like this council did some good work in getting that accomplished, and I don't want to take anything from that. So moving on, Parks and Rec needs assessment survey was received by us, and huge community response. So I want to say a big thank you to all who participated. There were well over 600 of the invited surveys that were returned, and then also the open survey over 500. So we've got significant response from the community, good data collected, and it gives a great deal of guidance to that department to move forward. So thank you to all who took the time to respond to that. That's really valuable. Also, on the tourism front, Hanging Lake, work on Hanging Lake trails beginning this month. And that's going to be impactful throughout the summer. And so tourism had a bit of a meeting in how to communicate that information to both visitors and also locals that like to use that area. So there's a response that will be crafted and also an opportunity to kind of guide visitors to other alternates for hiking when that area is closed. So that's good work done by our tourism department to kind of maintain community resources and make sure that our guests feel not so disappointed when they come up and can't enjoy one of our little gems. So thank you to the tourism.
Councilor Weimer.
Few things. So an update from River Commission this week. They're in the middle of issuing an RFP to assist with the master plan. I think that came up earlier a question came up earlier from someone, but that's where they are with that. And we are exploring the potential of a Shoshone field trip.
Oh, fun, please.
So
Yeah, it'll be noticed.
That's taken a life of its own, which sounds like super cool.
Yeah.
Swimming, we're thinking about riding the 15-mile long, tunnel that gets into it. It could be a Halloween, scary kind of thing, Lord knows. So just keep that in mind. And then on the tourism thing, so there was some energy back in January as we kind of explored where we were with tourism, the role of the management board. We felt like council had kind of maybe gotten a step away from that. And so the idea was to move forward and develop a longer term strategic plan, right? And so tourism, the TMB, the Tourism Management Board, is on track with that. They've contracted with a third party, Mission to Mission, I think is their name, who will come in and they are going to facilitate a half-day session with the TMB to come up with this longer term sort of vision and plan specifically around sustainable tourism management, right? So kind of a nice balance between tourists' needs and locals' needs. Aaron and I really trying to, take a soccer approach to this. We don't want no touching with your hands sort of thing. Stay away from it. Provide some guidance, but don't get into too deeply. We feel good about their plan and what they're doing. My question to you guys, right, is it seemed a little bit back in January that council felt like they wanted input into this strategic plan, right? Or some sort of role in developing that. Now, our options could be to let them go through their half-day deal, present something to us, and we don't necessarily take action on it. It could be a working session, that sounds great. Option 2 would be let them do their half-day deal, and let them be, and come back maybe, around budgeting season or at the midpoint, or as we gear up for 2025, provide some input at that point. The third option would be to have Mission to Mission facilitate a little bit more of a structured hour, 45 minutes or something within a working session to allow council to sort of build on and maybe adjust, but more likely build on the work from their half day. So I'm looking for some feedback, how you guys are thinking about.
I'm gonna let you ask for it. I'm gonna let Councilor Gotis jump in with thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think, thanks. I think you laid that out well. We have like 3 options, but we do have a process that's currently underway with an outside contractor we've tasked with going out and finding out other
Mhm.
information from other like communities, economic impacts, yada, yada. I think getting that information back and then us synthesizing that information in order to then inform the facilitator and the tourism board would be more productive. I think that I would worry if they did their half-day retreat kind of as business as usual, and then like 30 days later, we get that information back, and that potentially is in conflict with some of the directions we might want to go. It just might be a waste of time. So I would like this process maybe to play out and to inform the other process.
So you're option one.
If that's option one,
Yeah,
then yes.
that's option one. That's an option of let them get it.
Thank you.
Let them work through it half day, then come to us in a joint work session with tourism board. Is that, no?
That would be
that's not
option
what you're
three.
saying.
Option
Oh.
one is just more informing us of what they've done.
I didn't turn you off. You turned yourself off.
I did. Yes, no, I know. 'Cause I thought of that. No, if I thought option one was
Yeah.
they just go on their thing.
Okay.
That would be option two.
So option three is we do our thing and
Option
then,
three would be us a facilitated sort of 45, 60 minutes
Mhm.
that builds upon their half-day session.
So I would love to hear directly from the two representatives from the tourism board on what you have as a preference, because I think you guys have the most intimate relationship with them, and confidence and understanding of it. What would you guys recommend? Counselor Zelinski.
So yes, I think that I like the idea of, I feel like we've given the guidance
Mhm.
and the ask, let them work through the process and then come back to us with
Mhm.
the result of that.
Are you also feeling?
So just a result and not necessarily a working session where we provide input or additional direction or anything.
I think that with that result, there would be a little, because we're gonna have some interaction. So,
Yeah.
you know, I would say no less than probably 30 minutes
Okay.
of time to just like, something advanced, here's the sausage, as we say,
Yep.
from that. And then we can go through it, ask any questions, and then move on.
That's my preference too.
Okay,
What option is that? I'm
So-
sorry.
I think option three's
Yeah.
dash.
I was gonna say.
Three dash.
Yeah.
Okay.
Three B.
Okay.
I'd be in favor of
Option
that.
so-
six.
to be kind of a little more formal, can I just get kind of a round robin of all those in favor of that? Like, do we want to vote? Do you want to comment? You've commented.
I'd call a vote.
Okay, Counselor Kaup has a comment.
I just kind of had a question. Are they going to have is there any opportunity for public input? Because I think most of us up here on the dais have heard from local residents that, there are certain times a year when it's enough already with the tourists. And we're told constantly, we want us up here to represent the locals and put their
So-
needs ahead of.
If I could
Further.
answer to that, that is the impetus for
Okay.
this, is to get, it's a balanced approach, I think that our department that focuses on tourism has done an exemplary job
Hmm.
of attracting outsiders to Glenwood
Yes.
Springs.
Yeah.
What we have highlighted and asked of them is to manage tourism with the locals. Because the locals benefit from tourism also, whether they recognize it or not, with
Absolutely.
amenities
Our
and blah, blah,
economy
blah, blah.
does, yes.
But we need to close that gap a little bit of cooperation and perception and all of those things. And so a good portion of this endeavor is to recognize that.
Okay, and that's what I'm asking is,
Yeah.
will they have some input?
And
either
that's,
from
I
the
think
public or
this
from
is
data
really
or-
truly to seek that input and to help
Okay.
facilitate that. And then also my one bit of input during this discussion was to make sure that they engaged with Slate so that we didn't have redundancy of efforts and energy, and so that we were using our resources efficiently and sharing information.
Okay.
So
great.
I feel like this is a really nice kind of like holistic approach to, kind of recognizing tourism impacts and just like, hearing back from the community.
Okay, so that's great. I'm open to that, and that option 3 sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay. Counselor Gotis, you're still,
Well,
hold on one second. There you go.
yeah, I think before we have a tourism board that's full of people that benefit from tourism spending the dollars, take advantage of additional public dollars that we're spending on Slate to help bridge the gap. I mean, you said help the community understand it better. But, again, maybe I'm just coming off of this thing today where, the tourism focus versus the resident focus in most communities, there's a real gap. And I think it's greater than just selling the community on tourism being.
That's not, I think that maybe I misrepresented.
Okay.
This is seeking feedback from the community, not pushing.
So there would be like a community survey, there would be
It's
people
engagement, yes,
brought in.
yes.
And
Not
why would it be
during
through
that
the
work
tourism
session.
board? Why wouldn't we do that through us since we represent the residents and the tourism board represents the tourism businesses? I'm not looking to pick a fight. I'm
You
just,
can make the argument that those tasked with engaging with tourism should hear from the community. And I think that's the point of this, is to hear from the community, recognize, and make sure that that voice is being incorporated into all of the best practices on the tourist side.
but we'll get to engage with the community as well through this process without being filtered through the tourism businesses, correct?
So really quickly, and I know you just asked a question, but I'm pulling us up. We're down here.
I
and-
know,
and
that's why
really
I'm like-
low, and I'm pulling
that's why I
us
was
way
like-
up here. We now have a staff representative for this board, and it also happens to be our city manager. So I think I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. Help me, Steve.
So we should have our brief study done in about mid-June. I can send it out to everybody, both on the tourism promotion board and to you guys in June. Their July meeting is on the 13th, I believe. I think that's right, 13th. And maybe they can have, a discussion about, okay, what did that look like? Where do they want to go, et cetera? And we could have a work session with that board, the second meeting in July.
Sounds like a plan. Thank
Good.
you. Yep, that's
Okay.
perfect. I think, is everyone in agreement with that? Or are four of us in agreement with that?
Does that still align us with option 3?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm. Yep.
then I'm good.
Okay, great. Mitchell, thank you for bringing that to us. Was there anything else that you had?
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Counselor Schachter.
We're up back to council comments.
We, I think, yeah.
I have a few of them, of course. First of all, kudos to our staff. If it already hasn't been said, the Earth Day work and the cleanup and also a trip that Shelley and I and Watkins and Ellen Dole took 11 hours going to Grand Junction. Staff working on what would normally be their weekends, working really hard on our behalf, and it's greatly appreciated. Related to the mobile home community convening, I sent you my summary. It was pretty extensive. I was so impressed, and you guys are probably gonna get, I won't be there, unfortunately. Sydney Shallot is gonna be meeting June 6th. To me, that's a segue. That will be a segue for us deciding or helping 2C housing and council decide where does that fit into our workforce housing plan and what kind of resources. I'm meeting with 3110 people on a regular basis, not raising their expectations as much as trying to create a reality base and see where they are. So that was an outstanding convening, though, that covered so many things, and our staff was there. Second thing, based on a retreat, we kind of rehashed goals. Goals are easy, strategies and actions are less so. And we had some consistent, I would like to see, and I think Councilor Kaup brought it up, I would like to see a revamp in red, green, yellow, or green, red, yellow of what we had, and for us to update. And I think Steve said he got it, but I'd like to see something in print and
You're
and
working on
Shelley,
it, aren't you?
Shelley also put together a great summary of what was there and what's been accomplished and what's next. But I don't think we firmed up the actions that are our priorities, so I'd love to see that in the similar form. I appreciate John's apology. It's always hard to sit up in the public and say, oh, I'm sorry. Maybe none of us do it often enough. But related to that, I think it's critical and the mayor brought up and sent us, Carl and the mayor sent us some drafts of codes of ethics, which I naively thought the 2011 one had been adopted. So I would strongly suggest that we spend some energy in the very near future to adopt a code we're comfortable with. And you know, the Evans one was mentioned, that's pretty extensive. That's more like an operating guideline, but at least that we have some ethical guidelines and related, you know, one of the keys that you've heard over and over, I believe that when we make a decision, it's our decision. And unless council has endorsed something, I would encourage us to stay out of the public venue. Unless it's an approved letter from the mayor. I think we'll all be better off for that. And there's kind of an implied consent that that's what we should do. So thank you, John, and thank you, Mayor and Carl, for bringing that up. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else have comments? Okay, I have just a few. I was able to represent our community today out at Hanging Lake where we did a ribbon cutting for the Hanging Lake Trail. And it is not often that I stand back and am in awe of how many different organizations come together to support us in particular. That the trail is going to be an engineering work of art with so many different collaboration, both with energy, time, resources, and the amount of money that we are getting from so many different agencies across the Colorado. So I just really appreciate it. And also a little shout out to Brianna, who always represents us so well. She represented us incredibly well on the zoning reform Zoom meeting on Monday night. Thank you all the rest of the staff who were there as well. And thank you for all the attendees. I think we're going to see more and more activities like that in the future where voices are heard. And we're going to try to do them ahead of things instead of on the tail end of things, and work on our timing a little bit. But for all those who were present, I thank you. Thanks for asking great questions. I also wanted to say that when we have Sydney Shallett come, are we inviting 2C as well? Or who else is going to be at the table for that mobile home park acquisition?
I actually hadn't thought about that at all.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll leave it to you, but whoever you think is appropriate. to
2C
be there.
makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then on the vein of how we communicate, I do want to just say that, you know, it's important to me that we hear both sides of everything. I don't want to be a city council that doesn't always have just opposite voices up, and then we all just like, yep, check it. That's not a structure that works for me because I don't think it represents the community really well. And yet I also want to say that, you know, the letter did mention a person by name who, Greg Rippey. I think he was really great about working through us for months on end as we worked through a very challenging lease that I believed via my vote was good for the community. But I did want to just do a shout out that I really appreciate his willingness to continue through the wheels of government that churn incredibly slowly until we got to resolution. So thank you. And I think that's all that I have this evening. Thank you all. I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Oh, no. Social hour. Where are we going?
I'm broken.
Lean in.
We will reconvene at Casey's tonight.
Thank you. Okay, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. Have a great night.